Today on Public Research.
Vance reached out to him, and Teal parachuted Vance into this executive job. Then eventually, Vance was working, I think, for Mithro Capital and for Teal as a VC, and then later sets up a Nara Capital with seed funding from Teal and others. And I think one thing with Teal is that he's willing to make a bunch of these bets very quickly. I mean, he sees them, I think, as bets, and that, he kind of acquires the stable of young men and runs them through this gauntlet, and they are his proxies, and some of them don't fully work out, like Blake Masters, but as I write in the book, Vance hit enormously.
Journalist Jacob Silverman, author of Gilded Rage, Elon Musk and the Radicalization of Silicon Valley, joins me to discuss Peter Thiel, the PayPal Mafia, J.D. Vance, Tucker, TikTok, the Blue Sky Schism, why Kamala lost, and the future of the Democratic Party. All that in a world first.
Oh my
goodness. So first of all, sorry to interrupt, Daniel. Appreciate the chance to ask Jacob a quick question.
The first time an AI billionaire confronts a journalist live on air on today's episode of Public Research. I have a funny story for you. So I was trying to get ChatGPT to sort my question. I had like 200 questions for you. And for a few of them, I put like a paragraph of your text, and then it was like my question after it.
Yeah.
It would not reproduce those questions for copyright reasons.
Weird.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, they respect authors' rights.
Yeah, after at least now.
Okay, I'm going to try my Charlie Rose intro.
Sure.
Okay. Jacob Silverman is here. He's a journalist, and he is the author of Gilded Rage, Elon Musk and the Radicalization of Silicon Valley, which explores the extreme right-wing lurch of the men who operate some of the most powerful economic entities on the planet, from Y Combinator to Andreessen Horowitz to Tesla and Twitter. The book is not only a portrait of a crucial cohort in American life in 2025, but also an introduction into characters such as Peter Thiel, who helped shape our current vice president and perhaps future president, J.D. Vance. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me and for the introduction.
So let's think about the book almost like a play. And if you were to introduce the characters onto the stage, obviously Musk, but could you select sort of the main characters in the book?
Sure. Also, on my end here, we might have my cat entering as a character,
problem.
so forgive me.
No problem.
But yeah, this is at times a group portrait of sort of the greater PayPal Mafia types. And so we have Peter Thiel, who is the reigning Silicon Valley conservative, kind of presiding over all this and lurking in the background some points. His friend David Sachs, who's now better known to the public as a White House official on AI and crypto. Let's see, Joe Lonsdale is kind of a junior member of this crew and based out of Austin. When we're talking about local politics in San Francisco, there are people like Gary Tan, who's one of the heads of Y Combinator. It is kind of basically a group biography or group portrait. I like the play idea with a couple dozen players, and they're all pretty closely aligned. They're all men. They're all pretty much white men, and they all share a lot of the same interests, both financially and, of course, now politically.
I put out the call online for questions, and I got a submission. I think he's from the Bay Area, so I'll just play his question first. Can you see this guy?
Yeah, I can see
his
Peter
his
Thiel
name's
right
Peter. He had a question for you.
Oh my
So
goodness.
first of all, sorry to interrupt, Daniel. Appreciate the chance to ask Jacob a quick question. First of all, I should say that I did actually read the book. And if I understand the internal logic of it, basically the takeaway would be that these Bay Area billionaire elites, people like me, Mark, Elon, Sachs, the Google guys, we're all supposed to presumably apologize for the horrible impact we've had on America, right? And so basically, I guess I would basically reply to this, Jacob, with a fairly straightforward question of my own. Do you think America would be better off without, Tesla, OpenAI, the top AI labs, Meta, Google, PayPal, and the strongest VC network in the world? Because it seems like, unlike you, that the EU, Saudi, most nations on Earth would love to have us and the wealth and companies we've created in their nations. So who's right? You or most of the leaders of the world?
Okay, Peter.
That was a trip.
Peter, I don't know. He might look like somebody, I don't know. But what's your response?
Well, I guess I disagree with the framing or the premise that I think you can have some of those companies, though I could do away with a lot of the AI stuff, but without a lot of the bad behavior or outrageous concentration of wealth. But I would like them to apologize. I don't think that they will. That was interesting. It certainly sounded like him and looked like him too, but the sound especially was on. I think there is something baked into the Silicon Valley narrative that, especially that the fake Teal just articulated there at the end, that like VCs are these visionaries and you have to have them and everything sort of has to be this way or nothing. And I get this a fair amount as a tech critic too. And when I say, actually, no, there are a lot of things about tech, even consumer tech, that I appreciate or like, but there is not just necessarily a binary here or one way of being or the other. And I think there are ways in which, venture capital itself can be made more efficient and, and kind of less of a tax on America and its institutions, maybe fewer failed bets. But I don't necessarily think that the class of VCs itself, deserves its place by any sort of inherent right.
So I read the book and I feel like Thiel is sort of the center of the book, in my opinion, not Musk. So let's
fair.
Let's start with him.
Sure.
First of all, what's the deal with all these guys being from South Africa? Do you know that? Who else is South African? Do you know David Friedberg is South African too?
From All In?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
I had overlooked that.
I didn't know that either, but I looked it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and then another character who I think may only appear briefly in the book, but Roloff Botha from Sequoia.
Yeah.
And he's another kind of PayPal mafia guy. He was an executive at PayPal. I think Musk was involved in bringing him to the U.S. from South Africa. This is something that we also explore a bit on this podcast I did for CBC called "The Making of Musk," and it's certainly not a coincidence. I mean, one is just in some cases like Musk knowing Botha before. These were personal networks that brought them together, of like being South African. But also, there's a cultural and political inheritance, I think, and a shaping, especially for people who lived their whole childhoods like Musk did. Teal didn't grow up exclusively, and it was, I think, what became Namibia. But part of his youth in the U.S. too, I think. But
what did his parents do?
I think business, but I know that they were evangelical Christians. I don't actually really know their professions or remember offhand. I think it's discussed some in Max Chafkin's biography, which actually was recently reissued with a couple of new chapters. I was talking to him the other day. There's one concept that we explore in the podcast, which is this idea. It's called boss cop or bossism. The writer John Gantz has actually written an essay about this, and it's this sort of unofficial ideology or philosophy that you saw in kind of the capitalist world of apartheid South Africa, that the white man, the highest ranking white man in the room, was the absolute sovereign and in charge, and certainly based on a perception of racial hierarchy and birthright. And while we don't have a racial caste system explicitly like South Africa, I think their veneration of founders, their idea that they're all kind of CEOs or dictators of their own little countries, and the very kind of male first and sort of misogynist culture that they uphold. I mean, I think a lot of that can be traced to that South African upbringing. And And that is something that I try to draw out.
So let's go to the 1990s. Let's go to Stanford. And tell me about Keith Rabois and why he shouts slurs outside.
Yeah. So, Stanford remains so important, not just for the wider tech industry, but for Thiel and these other guys. Thiel is one of these people who is constantly railing about the corruption of American higher education, but is also always going to universities to speak there, to young Republican clubs and things like that. And he went to Stanford and got his law degree there. And that's where he found the Stanford Review, this conservative paper that he's continued to hire students from to this day. This is still a pipeline for kind of Thiel world and PayPal Mafia world. And that's where Joe Lonsdale comes out of. And Keith Rabois is his contemporary at Stanford, and they're friends. They're both gay, not out yet. Um, I don't think Rabois was out. And they are walking. One night, Rabois and another friend or two, I don't think Teal was there, are walking by a dorm or with some staff housing, and he yells all these homophobic slurs at a guy that lives there, a professor or a grad student who's a professor, and who I think is not gay, but it's kind of neither here nor there. He calls the guy a bunch of slurs, wishes he says, "I hope you die of AIDS," and then he turns like seen today. It's really interesting. I mean, interesting in quotes, but this is like now it's classic conservative victimology. Like, look at just like the thing the other day. If you saw that woman who's a student at a University of Oklahoma who gave this like religious fundamentalist answer to a question about gender and now is acting like a victim but anyway what
Right,
happened
right.
was like Rabois basically gets approached by the university, but they don't do anything. The university eventually, as I write in the book, they concede the point. They basically say you exercised your free speech, you didn't really violate the campus code, whatever it was at the time. Those were just that was kind of disgusting language, but non-actionable, basically. But he uses it to paint himself as this victim and this free speech martyr, and he eventually transfers out of Stanford and goes to law school. I think he finishes at Harvard, and when later on David Sachs and Thiel make a lot out of this too. They write about it. Then they write about it in their book the um, what was it, the multicultural myth.
The diversity myth, I
That's
think.
what the
Yeah.
diversity myth, excuse me, which is sort of this anti-woke screed we would call it today, but about multiculturalism in the early 90s in campus politics. They use Rabois as an example. Like nothing happened to this guy. Actually, his speech rights were protected. And then, but and if you look at him now, especially on X, I mean, he's a pretty crazy guy who not only has very extreme right wing views, but is just like volcanic with anger at all times.
So,
So the fact that he would do this is not necessarily a
so wait, wait, wait,
surprise.
wait. I thought it was supposed to be. My understanding was it was some grand philosophical exercise, and it was all premeditated. And
Well, he later claimed, like, sort of, yes, I was trolling you guys in order to prove a point, that like to see if like you would challenge my speech rights. But I think he was trying to claim that he still somehow won because he was criticized so heavily and put upon. But kind of mixing criticism and legitimate criticism for his exercise of his free speech with actual oppression, which is what a lot of conservatives do now. And it's like, well, actually, there were meetings about him, and people were upset and wrote op-eds and letters to the editor, but nothing happened. And so, in a way, like, I think actually his thesis was sort of vindicated, but he still had to be the victim.
uh,
And what I was gonna say, sorry, one more thing is, in that book, The Diversity Myth, at the end they're thanking all these people who helped them, including a lot of political operatives, and then they thank Keith Rabois and they call him a victim of campus diversity politics. Like, it's a little tongue in cheek, but that's also how they saw him.
and you said the Stanford Review when Theo Rant was homophobic.
Um, I can't remember offhand about some of the specific pieces they published, but they had the rape issue, um, which was basically defending rape
Oh,
and
okay.
minimizing it. And that was something that Sachs wrote in. I think Teal had a piece in there. It's hard to find now, but pieces of it ended up going into that book, The Diversity Myth, and and then they later apologized for it. But I think they really only apologized for a narrow section of what was in that book. I would say that about like homophobia and racism, and other sort of bigotry emanating out of either that magazine or that world. It's like for a lot, some of those are maybe earnestly felt beliefs, but some of it is also a little bit of this contrarianism.
Oh,
Teal
okay.
is a proud contrarian and sort of trying to get away with stuff. I mean, I think that's what the Raboy thing is. Like a gay guy shouting homophobic slurs and wishing death by AIDS upon someone at the height of the AIDS epidemic. It's because this guy has this almost perverse idea about contrarianism, and that's partly where that comes from.
So,
I
so
mean, I would just say that I think there's some reporting from that time at Stanford also that um, Teal may have made supportive comments about apartheid. I think this is a mix of genuine right wing belief in a lot of cases, but also this delight in provocation and trolling and holding themselves as kind of somehow countercultural or outside, the groupthink
he
of the
was he
establishment.
was a chess player, right? Was he like a highly ranked?
Yeah, he is or was a good chess player, and there was one time I think it was at PayPal, but where he famously played something like a dozen people at once. Maybe that must have been at Stanford still. I think it was a campus event where he played something like a dozen different games at once, and I believe won most, if not all. Like yeah,
So
he's one of some of these guys you do think are rather dumb at times. Teal I think comes off as not very eloquent, but he's intelligent in some ways, certainly.
yeah, he's quite smart. How did these two lawyers get into tech, Theo and Sachs?
They're both guys who I think reflect actually, a way in which going to law school has simply changed. Like going to an elite law school, is still a path to high levels of law if you want. But for some people, and I know one or two people like this, you can go get a job at Google right afterwards and work in business, and you maybe will never even apply for the bar. And Teal is someone who has had all these very sort of public struggle sessions about ascending the meritocratic ladder. I mean, this is why he and Vance bonded years later, which was that he told this whole story at Yale, came to speak at Yale. Vance was a law student there about like, oh, you're just gonna go through Yale and then go work on Wall Street for a big law firm, and it was kind of this image of like soul sucking drudgery, but from the right wing libertarian tech guy's perspective, rather than like anything left. And I think that's a sort of narrative that Teal had experienced himself. Had been a lawyer for a couple of years and just hadn't liked it, it seems, and then found in tech something that much more fit his speed. But I think also for a lot of people, it is just sort of this credential sometimes now that they pick up along the way. But Teal, I think, also has these contradictions in himself in that he's always complaining about mainstream institutions and higher ed and stuff. But he has multiple degrees. He's still going back to these universities. That's where he hires from. He still seems to believe in that kind of prestige and merit-based system, even as he's constantly denouncing it. And it's certainly been useful for him.
So Theo, Musk, Sachs, they do PayPal, which is a genuine innovation. They all get very rich, and we get the PayPal mafia, which is many people, many of them immigrants, Russian Jewish immigrants, South African, et cetera, Max Levchin, blah blah blah. So they're all really wealthy. Now tell me about this thing that Thiel does, which is he seems to just, like you say, and I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. He takes these in principle. He takes these young people under his wing. I mean, like Joe Lonsdale is one, and we will have to touch on his NDA thing, which is the craziest thing I've ever heard. JD Vance is another, but but there's more. There's oh my god, what's his name? Blake Masters, who helped write From Zero to One, which I actually kind of like. I think I read that book was sort of interesting actually to me. Um, so tell me about. But he seems to just set these guys up. It's like he met JD Vance. You describe it. He meets him for lunch, and it's like he's like, "I like you. I'm gonna make you." And then he's like, "Okay, come work for me. Oh, I'm gonna give you a VC firm, and then you're just gonna
Yep.
be rich in like 3 years." How does that work?
Yeah. So after Teal spoke at Yale, Vance reached out to him, and basically that's what happened. I mean, supposedly Teal parachuted Vance into this executive job. Then eventually Vance was working, I think, for Mithro Capital and for Teal as a VC, and then later sets up Nara Capital, which is another one of these um, Lord of the Rings inspired names with seed funding from Teal and others. And I think one thing with Teal is that um, he's willing to make a bunch of these bets very quickly. I mean, he sees them, I think, as bets, and that he kind of acquires the stable of young men and runs them through this gauntlet, um, and they are his proxies, and some of them don't fully work out. Like Blake Masters didn't, has been a dud electorally a couple times now, but I think is still working for Teal in some capacity, and um, and he is also someone who can be pretty cold and or quite cold and is not and will if you don't if the someone doesn't work out, he'll switch or he'll dump someone. I mean, Musk was famously kind of engineered out of or kicked out of PayPal in a boardroom coup when he was on his a honeymoon of one of his early marriages, and Teal helped um, engineer that coup, and they were friends. But that is how Teal operates, and now they're kind of friends again. But um, it's notable. I think that there are pretty much no women in this world. That Teal is an older gay man who likes to be surrounded by young men, and that's who seems to populate this world.
So, can I go over the timeline because it's sort of astounding to me? So, uh, I don't. Maybe you don't know it off the top of your head. So, when when does Vance meet Teal? What year is that?
I can't remember offhand. He mentions it in this essay that he wrote in the Vance in the Lamp, I believe, a Catholic magazine.
Okay, so I think it's like 2000. Let's say like 2013, maybe around then.
Yeah, it's when he's in law school after after he's gone to Iraq, after he's certainly an ambitious guy who's already like thinking towards his hillbilly elegy future.
Okay, I'm asked. It was 2011. Okay,
Hmm.
so then let's do the timeline. So when does Vance go to work for Mithril? Do you know roughly?
He passes through a couple of these other jobs, like this executive job that it was quoted in the Times, I believe. Oh, it was a favor to Peter. But I think within a year or two, he's at Mithra.
Okay, so he goes to okay. It says that he joined as a junior investor in 2016, and then in 2017, he creates his what Theo like gives him money to create his own capital from Narnia.
Yeah,
Okay, and then it says and then he became wealthy. So that's 2017. Then he runs for Senate in 2020 or what? Yeah, right.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, and that's when he gets a huge infusion of cash from Teal.
okay. So 3 years. What does he do in those three? How does he? Did he make any amazing bets?
Not that I know of, and he's not associated with any. He invested in a few companies. One or two of them were. I'd have to revisit the list. One or two of them were kind of ideological aligned, but a couple of them were agricultural related. I remember kind of like ag tech, and healthcare. Not certainly not political. Kind of typical of the time. And I've talked to other people who kind of generally just say, "Oh, he was undistinguished as a VC." And but Yeah, so there's nothing even popularly that we ever hear about his time in tech. Like, oh, he did this, or he lined up this investment, which is what you always hear about particular VCs. They have their list of wins. But so I don't think there's anything there beyond his capacity
D-
to network.
does it strike you as basically Peter Thiel constructing like you're gonna be a VC?
Yeah.
You're gonna be a successful VC guy, and yeah, I'll just make it happen for you. Is that kind of the sense you get?
Yeah, I mean, these people really feel like, the hand of Teal or a proxy of Teal. And that's why I said he makes these bets because he's had a bunch of these and, some of them haven't quite worked out. But as I write in the book, Vance hit enormously. And I think that says a little bit about the sophistication of Vance himself as kind of a fellow operator, someone willing to be used, someone who's changed his name a couple times and changed his identity, from kind of the hillbilly guy to the Marine to the striving future lawyer to the tech guy, and then the new right Catholic. He's a very malleable
Yeah,
type, I think, and that's why he fits so well with for Teal. Is like he's like, all right, I've changed my identity a number of times already. Let's do it again.
yeah. Um, so if Theo was and just take liberty with this, so for legal reasons, we'll just say it's Jacob's guess. If Theo was king of America and he could make it whatever, make his dream society, what would that society be like?
Well, it's interesting because I wonder a lot what are these guys so unhappy about, or what is the positive, and also what is the positive vision? T, uh, Teal, as it himself said, that the right needs a more positive vision to kind of sell to people. I mean, I think it's fair to say that he doesn't believe in democracy. He's said that in his society, I mean, people probably wouldn't vote. Women definitely wouldn't vote because that's something he's also written questioningly about. It would be essentially a corporate dictatorship, I think. But in terms of like Teal aspires to do X or Y. There's really nothing in his history that you could really say. Like he doesn't even have sort of the aspirations of Musk to go to Mars or something. He wants to live forever. He said that. So I think it's a great question. What does Teal actually want? Or what do these guys want? Because their ambitions are supposedly so grandiose, and their needs and their greed seems inexhaustible. But Musk claims he needs $1 trillion so he can go to Mars, which um, the going to Mars part will never happen. The trillion might, but someone like Teal at the end of the day just strikes me as a warmed over authoritarian with like genuine philosophical and intellectual interests, but nothing original in any way. He's written some stuff, but is more of a popularizer of some of his heroes than anything else. And in some ways, I think that's reflected in his interviews too. Like when he had that interview with Ross Douthat over the summer, it was a great interview, but I mean, he struggled to answer the question, should the human race endure? And he goes into, well, it depends sort of what you mean. And, someone might say, well, he's just awkward, or he might, in his mind, he's thinking like, well, the human race could become an AI or something like that. But he still struggles to say that. And,
He,
like what does he actually want except to, total freedom, however he defines it?
well, I believe he's been called a libertarian. What is this book, The Sovereign Individual? That did you read that?
I've pieced through it, I admit. And
What's
I
the
have
gist of that book?
I think it's just it's uh, this sort of fantasy of an individual who is free of governments that's become an important text in various sovereign citizen movements and extreme libertarian movements about escaping the strictures of the state and being self-sovereign. And this is something that really hit people in tech with some appeal because they thought that, especially kind of coming out of the '90s cypherpunk movement, who thought that there were, as Thiel has called them, technologies of freedom, that technology could make people self-sovereign, and that's what has sort of taken off in Teal world. I mean, that's what he when he was talking about technologies of freedom, he was actually referring to seasteading, these floating cities that he wanted someone to build that he was funding. that have also never really happened. But that's the idea, is that there's sort of this this platonic ideal of liberty, of self-sovereignty, and that maybe you won't get there completely, but the means to get there, the kind of means to escape the strictures of society, are technological.
Okay, now are you ready for some challenging questions? Are you
Let's
prepared?
go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've listened to Theo since I was like in high school. I remember watching him on the show Uncommon Knowledge. I don't know if you've heard of that. And he came on and he was talking about a book from the 60s about technology and like, oh, the pace of innovation has slowed down. I wish we would deregulate, pharmaceuticals and stuff.
It didn't pan out as Sir Vance Schreiber predicted. How come?
Well, I think that's a very, very interesting, very important question. The basic thing that Sir Vance Schreiber predicted was that you were going to have this exponential growth in technology, and I think the very difficult problem is there's been less growth than people thought there was going to be, and we have obviously the big headline type stuff. You have stories on Google and Apple, and there's sort of all these very high-profile tech companies. But in some sense, the compound growth has been less than people thought. Even with globalization, even with the computer revolution, the internet revolution, the biotech revolution, it somehow has not added up to quite as much of a difference as people thought.
And I'm not a libertarian on economics, but it wasn't disgusting. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, he wants like less, like, So I guess maybe the premise of this question is wrong, but instead of asking it, I just made a video because I see Vance as having two main influences, Tucker and Theo. So I made a little thing.
What is it from the Hebrew Bible, or one could say Old Testament, that you've incorporated into your own political thought?
Well, I think I don't know. I think my views on this are fairly orthodox Christian in that there's some continuity between the old and the new. There's some sense it's sort of hard to define where maybe the Christian God is the original progressive, where the new is better than the old. I think it's the first time where the new is simply better than the old just by virtue of being new. But if you exaggerate the difference too much, that ends up being problematic. That's sort of where you end up saying that the Old Testament God is like maybe just a different God from the New Testament God, and that sort of all the extremely progressive forms of higher criticism, things like this in the 19th century, they were all deeply anti-Semitic. And so I think if you're too progressive, you end up becoming an anti-Semite. And then you have to somehow say there's some progress. But the Scwhartzian intuition I would have is it's just always this reversal in perspective where the Bible takes things from the side of the victim.
No, I should say, J.D. Vance spent election night 2020 with Tucker Carlson. So here we go.
Tucker Carlson, starstruck by historian who calls Churchill, not Hitler, the chief villain of World War II and casts Holocaust as accident.
I just want to say, I think you are the most important popular historian working in the United States today.
Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War.
In your read of history, do you believe a united Europe under Hitler rule would have been a better outcome than what actually transpired? Asks Cutting Straight the Word. To which Daryl Cooper replies, as martyr made,
I can't imagine anything worse happening than what did happen. This may be putting it too crudely for some, but the pictures on the left was infinitely preferable in virtually every way than the one on the right. Daryl Cooper, July 2024, posting on Twitter. If you're having a bad day, just remember that the Trump shooter is currently wandering around hell looking for Hitler while the two guys Kyle Rittenhouse dropped. Figure out how to break the news to him. Daryl Cooper, a.k.a. Martyr Made, twitter.com, July 14th, 2024.
global backlash after Tucker Carlson gives platform to neo-Nazi Nick Fuentes.
The case. And that's my concern. And I absolutely agree with you. I would say, though, that the big challenge to that is organized Jewry in America. I don't think Bill Ackman is capable of that. And many other, on the right and the left. And I see Jewishness as the common denominator. And I like what you said the other day. If you're serving in another country's military or have dual citizenship, you really can't be a part of this project.
Well, that's an easy one.
We also love Adolf Hitler, okay? And not to go. It's not funny. We're not laughing. Okay, Hitler was kind of epic in a lot of ways. We also love Adolf Hitler. Well, not
the right.
Okay, we really love him.
I mean, there are people on the right who have spent the last 2 months every single day focused on a conflict in a foreign country as our own country becomes dangerously unstable with tens of millions of people who shouldn't be here in the country, and they're focused with laser intensity on foreign conflicts, and they don't care about the country at all.
There's about 18%
and
crossover.
then we have the all-in guys
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question about this kissing his ass. Listen to this.
Crossover between All In and your work, Tucker, and they send me images of you out there and about in the world. And I just got this one in my DMs. I don't know what's going on. What's going on here? Is that a park in New Hampshire where you guys? This is the bromance is
run out of
complete.
these yet?
We got
It's like a Vineyard Vines T-shirt.
The bromance is now complete. Tucker, we'd love to have you back on a regular basis. Actually,
that was
I think
so fun.
That was super fun. That was great.
And I'm sorry
Excellent.
for talking too much. You guys spun me up into a frenzy, but I appreciate it.
I understand why you were ¡1 in media. That was so fun. I really
Absolutely.
enjoyed it.
New launch. Everybody go to tuckercarlson.com, and when the subs come out, sure, you can sub for Tucker Sachs. Are you going to be a sub for Tucker Sachs? Are you subbing?
I'm going to dom for Tucker.
Oh, God. Poor Tucker. All right. Thanks, Tucker.
What'd you guys think? That was fun.
That was great.
Yeah, should we debrief?
I'm a sucker for Tucker. I'll be honest. Like, can we get him on group chat? I mean, can you imagine being on
he's
group
such
chat with
such
Tucker?
a fun guy. Great guy.
He's a great entertainer. And you know what? I know he's right wing, conservative, but he's actually, I think, a first principled thinker who thinks for himself. We didn't get into January 6th.
To being president, you have your fans want it. They want you to run. You have the audience.
My fans.
You have the skill. You have the intellect. Would you consider public service?
Not even for a second, but if I did, I would be like,
yeah. So, my first, okay. I'm just going to ask this real quick, and then we're going to go back to Tucker versus Theo things. David Friedberg and David Sachs are Jewish, right?
Yeah, I believe both. Certainly Sachs, yeah.
Friedberg is Jewish too, I think.
Yeah.
And they love Tucker Carlson? What the?
I mean, that may be more of a class thing than anything
Yeah.
else. Just sort of, really rich guys sticking together. I mean, I don't know, but I guess Tucker has been an Israel critic in one way or another, or dabbled in anti-Semitism for a while. But yeah, it feels just sort of like, kind of elites.
He's part of
being
the
chummy
club.
with elites.
He's part of the
club.
club.
Part of the club. Yeah, that's well put.
Okay, so let's talk about Theo versus, because my one, no, it's not a critique, because I think, it's not a critique to say, I wish you would focus more on Tucker, even though he does have a finance connection with this Omed Malik guy.
Yeah.
But he's not in tech, so I totally understand it. But if you ask me, I am much more concerned about Tucker's influence on Vance than Theo.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I can listen to a Theo interview for an hour and not feel like I need to take a shower. I can't even listen to Tucker Carlson. He's so vile and promoting
And that laugh.
Yeah, and he's promoting Nazis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So which are you more concerned about?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, both concern me in different ways. I mean, Thiel is someone who doesn't have popular appeal, I think, or charisma. And, he'll always, I think, at least to anyone except for a few people on the right, kind of fall flat on his face during an interview. But he's still funding and right-wing projects. His money goes a lot of places. His international links with the far right are pretty huge. And he is a major defense contractor who seemingly, has no regard for democracy. So, I think in a lot of ways he is the most dangerous person in tech. I think Tucker, is someone who, despite how he acted in that clip, could run for president. I'm not looking forward to it, but and I don't know if he'd win, but he has that kind of appeal, and and he is someone who is both platforming right wingers and Nazis and openly laundering their ideas, or laundering their ideas into the open, I guess you might say. So, I'm curious to learn more about Tucker's relationship with Vance, and at this point, is everyone just sort of on the same team?
Yeah, maybe I'm totally wrong. But I've always seen Theo as not, he's not like an anti-Semite. Like, he's not kind of viciously bigoted the way, or at least publicly, as Tucker is.
Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, that's not really part of his persona. Like he may hold bigoted views, or as been accused of being sympathetic to apartheid South Africa, as I said, but um, you know, he is a capitalist. He is a venture capitalist and wants to make money. So he wants power. He wants to do business, but and wants to fund right-wing causes, which he also has, found. He's funded right-wing thinkers like Curtis Yarvin or other people who are simply anti-democratic or maybe Nazi adjacent, perhaps. So if you hear like, hey, Thiel might have been affiliated or associated with some Nazis, that's perhaps not a surprise, but it's not happening, on a talk show.
This leads me to an anecdote from the book. So can you tell me about the tall, blonde young man who buttonholed you at an event? Inform me about something called esoteric Hitlerism.
Yeah, I never heard of it before. So I talk in the book about charter cities, which are these efforts to kind of build these corporate city-states in various places, either seasteading or the biggest one is Prospera in Honduras. And I went to this series of presentations at this place called Sovereign House. I think it might have moved, but it's in like downtown New York, and it's kind of this sort of artsy right-wing tech hangout scene. And they had an open bar, and you go in there, and it's like where Curtis Yarvin supposedly hangs out sometimes, and in the Dime Square, as it's been called, and they had all these presentations, including one from someone from Prospera. Most of them, though, were from things that were little more than Discord servers. That we're going to give you e-citizenship in our new digital microstate that will have its own cryptocurrency, and you're like, what is this? But before you're walking around the room and talking to people, and there's a lot of books on the wall, and there's sort of an intellectual salon type feel. And this guy comes up to me, very Aryan looking. I'm 5'11", I'm kind of average height, but like he's a lot bigger than me. But he just sort of starts talking about, oh yeah, I'm interested in esoteric Hitlerism, and he starts going on about that, and I'm like, oh, you are being very sincere about that, and also like this is a safe space for that kind of sincerity. That's what sort of struck me. It's like, especially on the left, I'd say sometimes like those authentic expressions of right-wing or especially racist right-wing thought can be surprising in a way. Like, oh right, you're not being ironic or anything like that. This is like just you have this elaborately developed theory of Aryan Nazism that you pulled from Wikipedia and whatever else, and that is what you think. And I ended up talking to some other people that night, I think, and hearing these presentations, which were pretty unimpressive.
Well,
I don't think that these guys are on the march.
What is it? What is it?
I would struggle to recall what it actually is, but I think it's sort of like maybe a more mystical form of Nazism, like more related to its like Central Asian, Aryan kind of, not roots exactly, but like some of that inspiration.
It's like Nazism with meditation kind of thing. Maybe.
Yeah, it might be part of the, Nazism had this whole occult side that you like see in the Indiana Jones movies and stuff. And
Savitri Devi.
Those people exist, that's what it kind of taught me is like, these people exist in the tech world. Like, yeah, some of them are ridiculous. Curtis Yarvin is ridiculous, but like they are funded by Thiel and other tech elites, and they're mingling, and they're trying to organize and start companies and stuff.
And not to stereotype, but some people would say you do look maybe Jewish a little bit.
I am visibly Jewish.
Do you think that he was aware of that?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think so. I don't think maybe not a long enough conversation for that. I mean, maybe if there were more back and forth. But I didn't get anything overt about that. I mean, I get online all the time because, especially now, I mean, X has started to feel a little. I mean, it's not like I'm not offended anymore, really, but I'm just like it's a little intolerable. Like
cesspool.
I posted some anti-ICE thing the other day. It was really just a poster about a picture of a poster of people, saying blow whistles if ICE is in the neighborhood. And you just get outright Nazis going like Silverman, or of course you're a Jew. And I'm just like, this is just annoying, man.
No, they do.
That's what they want.
They do the same thing with my last name in the comments. Scwhartz. I'm like, okay.
And it's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be here anymore on this platform.
Well, okay, let's get into that. So let's talk about Twitter, because I actually think this is probably the most undercovered story, maybe no, not the most, but one of the biggest macro unwritten about stories is the end, basically the end of kind of content moderation by big tech. Outside of like, if you upload like, somebody pooping or like explicit hardcore pornography, that will be, the AI will get rid of that. But we're seeing right now Candace Owens is just, she's been doing Holocaust denial, anti-Semitic stuff for years now, but she just goes on there and defames people every day. She says the Macrons, incest. Then she says Erica Kirk, might have killed Charlie Kirk, and the French killed, and the Egyptian. She's just defaming. She says, that guy's a pedophile at TPUSA. And Susan, for whatever you want to say, Susan Wojcicki, if this was 2018, she would have booted Candace Owens. They had some kind of Now there's
on
just,
YouTube, you mean?
There's they don't, and I really do tie that back to Musk's Twitter takeover. I think they saw it. They saw how he got rid of all the trust, the content moderation people, and they're like, great, we don't want to have to pay these people. So talk about, first of all, did Musk make Twitter better? And then the impact of what he did.
Sure. So I don't think he made it better. And certainly the user experience, I was talking with someone about this the other day. Like, the user experience is still worse, I would say. And someone actually asked me, like, is there anything that is better about Twitter? And I try to really think about it. One thing I do think is better is that while I think Grok is pretty annoying, using Grok to auto-translate posts from other languages in the timeline, I actually find very helpful. Like, I like that, may not be perfect, but I can just see like a Spanish or Hebrew or whatever post right there. Most of the other stuff I could leave. But, he gutted Twitter. He fired something like 80% of staff. It was, in a way, it was this precursor to Doge, to see if, like, can you run this thing on a shoestring? And it's mostly worked in some ways, but, it has totally reshaped the site intentionally in this far right image, and thereby tanking its profitability. But that was a choice that he made, and I think that was also an effective one, at least in getting Trump reelected as president. I don't know if he'll have to do a lot to ever like restore Twitter, now X, as a business.
But do you agree? Am I wrong in saying that? Maybe it was also Trump. I think it was Trump and the Twitter takeover. Like YouTube, these other companies basically stopped.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I meant to address that. Sorry. I think also what Musk does in some ways is like offer this permission structure. Like, he does something crazy or he says something crazy. And there are other people, I think, on the right in various ways who do this, but he sort of has this role for the tech industry. And then, like, well, at least you're not being as crazy as Musk, or or he shows that people can get away with things. And you're right, he did get rid of trust and safety, and also sort of demonize the whole process, and helped. He invented this thing called the Twitter files, saying that there was this gigantic conspiracy between social media companies and government to censor people.
The Watergate of our time.
Yeah, and there are issues here. There are speech issues. There are issues about government power here, but it, of course, is not the coordinated conspiracy that his kind of media proxies and propagandists claim it was. But the nuanced version is for another time. But he helps kind of propagate this lie that all content moderation is censorship. That was already an idea there on the right, that all content moderation is censorship, and it's a very glib sort of aphorism that's appealing to these guys. And he I don't think he ever fully got rid of it on Twitter. I mean, certainly they do it to screen out gore and nudity, like you said, or at least gore and stuff, but he stretched what's possible, I think, and kind of allowed the rest of the industry to say, yeah, we don't need to do this anymore, because they don't want to be in that business. They don't want to be in the moderation business, and they don't want to kick people off because it's bad for engagement or it gets them involved in political fights they don't want to be in.
And he's paying these people. So in effect, what you see is people are paid to lie. Yeah.
So, I mean, the issue is also that he welcomes back all these right-wingers and Nazis and Nick Fuentes types, and Nick Fuentes himself. And then he says, okay, no moderation, no censorship. And also, he institutes these monetization mechanisms that induce people to be as extreme as possible and to lie constantly. So he gets rid of the blue checks and says you can buy a blue check and then get paid to post if you generate a lot of engagement. And so, of course, that just means that all these slop mongers and right wingers are going to start posting slop and right wing hysteria about migrants and whatever else because you're provoking people and then you get paid. And, it creates this like flywheel like dynamic where you're just going to get more extremism. And that's going to be the growth segment of the site.
And when there's an emergency or like serious breaking news and you search a term, it used to be useful to know like who is like an actual journalist. You know? Like so that's been gotten rid of.
I mean, and that was also this sort of destabilization of truth and of anyone as an expert. I mean, you hear this from Mark Andreessen a lot, like that all experts are liars, basically. And Musk said a lot in the last couple of years, you are the media, and praising Twitter in those real-time kind of disaster scenarios you're talking about, which it used to be, of course, much better at. And with, people can't sift information if the informational environment is full of liars and Nazis and propagandists, and if there's harassment, if you can't tell what's real and what's not. This sort of this vicious free-for-all that he seems to envision is not a healthy informational ecosystem or a good place for truth to emerge.
So you wrote that Musk's Twitter is infiltrated by authoritarian foreign governments. You're referring to Saudi Arabia. Now, I felt like there might have been an issue there because you're in the book. You're basically against any moves against TikTok and any concerns about the Chinese government's control of that. So how do you square those two?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first, actually, I think I focus a lot on the Saudi issue, both with Twitter and then more broadly with the tech industry, because they are probably the biggest funder of U.S. startups, and then they're quickly followed behind by the UAE and Qatar, which are all very all dictatorships and certainly whitewash a lot of crimes of their own through the tech industry and elsewhere. But this does involve other these kinds of relationships extend to other authoritarian countries. Like I mentioned briefly, there's some reporting out there about Twitter having relationships with basically spies from India and Russia, putting people on the payroll. I'm sorry, China and India, and putting people on the payroll. I mean, I think these issues do extend kind of anywhere these companies operate. And someone like Musk, with his deep Chinese interests and his unwillingness to ever criticize the Chinese government, is very concerning on that front. I think TikTok is a tough one for me because of how it's sort of used as a political football or as in this sort of new Cold War with China. Like, sure, I'm concerned about Chinese government surveillance through the many apps it probably has access to, but I'm also concerned that like it's used at once to amp up this Cold War with China that I see them as an adversary, but I also don't think that the tech war and the economic war has been very helpful. I think it's sort of led to a lot of saber rattling and threat inflation, and that it hasn't been very profitable for either side.
I don't think the security. I'm not really worried about the security thing.
Yeah.
But giving them control. I mean, I know this is very contentious because this is not about the Israel thing.
Sure.
If you look just at the anti-Semitism numbers with Gen Z, have you seen them? They're much higher than any generation. Much higher. Mm-hmm. And that is the TikTok generation. And they promote, there seems to be this trend of very weird sort of extreme stuff. Remember the viral thing of the Bin Laden letter, which includes a line about you're owned by the Jews, and then all these Gen Z were crying about how much they love it. And I think Xi called it spiritual opium the other day, the Wall Street Journal.
That's interesting.
So it wouldn't be surprising if they are trying to boost extreme divisive views. Are you concerned about that?
Yeah, that, so, in terms of what kind of influence over the algorithm, and then what in turn does that, mean for TikTok users and Americans, I think is a totally valid concern. Both, just whether from national security to more of like a media diet, and what are people learning, what are young people learning, and what kind of engagement bait is being used against them and things like that. And what I worry is just that it's gonna be handed off to Trump allies who will just make it whatever their right wing vision is of a content recommendation machine, which I guess maybe is like something like Elon Musk's X. But the one issue is it is very hard to study these things, and that's an issue with TikTok. That's an issue with a lot of these companies. Musk has made the API for X more restrictive and more expensive. So I do worry about that, and I don't want to minimize what you're talking about. I guess what I've tried to say at times is that TikTok shouldn't necessarily be singled out on its own without understanding those kinds of forces that you're mentioning.
I want to close on the Democratic Party.
Sure.
Oh, actually, before that, this is another not written about hugely important thing. I call it the blue sky schism.
Yeah.
And this is it's a real thing. All these they're kind of like whenever I go to Blue Sky, it's like, oh, these are like the nice people who care about news and but they're I mean, it's one of those issues I'm literally 50-50 on. I can argue both sides really strongly about, oh, you're just putting yourself in a ghetto versus, oh, no, it's good. There's an alternative. We're not all beholden to Musk.
Yeah.
So I feel so conflicted on it, but it does. I can't do multiple apps, so I'll go months without going to Blue Sky, and then I'll go there and I'll be like, oh, here are all the good people. It's like, what's been going on here for 2 months? But how do you feel about that? The Blue Sky schism.
Well, I don't begrudge people wanting to be in sort of a nicer, gentler place.
Yeah.
Like, you're not obligated to open yourself up to this fire hose of information, and also, this often unpleasant one. I think we take some of that stuff for granted now, or even there's this idea more on the right, I guess, that, exposing yourself to uncomfortable ideas or certain things like that is important, which, in the broad sense, yes, but is X the place for that? I don't know. And I also think about more earlier internet communities, which were oftentimes rather small or devoted to specific topics, like a Dave Matthews Band message board or something, or some computer game message board that was very active that you might have been on, whatever else it might be. Like, in some ways, a lot of the most successful online communities have been more narrow and not necessarily exclusionary, but built around a small communal interest or cultural interest or whatever else, or political one. So, I'm more open. I go on Blue Sky a bit. I like you. I mostly just use X or one app. But I'm not willing to say oh, people are just siloing themselves off, because when I don't know what else they're doing. They might be reading more. They might be looking at other news outlets more. And also, but the general media environment is just so messed up and ugly at times, and fractured, not working well on the business side. As someone who works in journalism, I can say that that I think people should be experimenting or trying new things, and Blue Sky still kind of counts as that.
One of the problems with Blue Sky is a little I'm not saying bring in the Nazis, but it'd be nice to have a few Republicans,
Sure, I get that. You don't necessarily want there can be obvious groupthink or homogeneity.
You want some differences, some
debate, and where people might be afraid to disagree or something like that. So that sort of forced pleasantness and everyone kind of in this kumbaya atmosphere might not be what you want. And so that I could see, if it stays that way, or that's what people land on, then it's not going to be a very enjoyable place to be. And and I think there may be a question there about how do you introduce a little productive fractiousness or discord and novelty, without and I think it's very possible.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
Twitter wasn't great, but for a lot of people, it was a lot better before Musk took over. And there's no reason why on that sort of that spectrum it can't be moved towards a little more towards that way.
Exactly. Well, I before to close with the Democrat issue, I have to mention these two hilarious anecdotes from your book. One is, if I'm a delivery driver for FedEx and I have to deliver something in Joe Lonsdale's estate in Texas, what do I have to do that?
So let me be clear. I can't say who this person worked for.
Okay.
Okay. I gendered them, but already. But in the book, I do say that I think I say a delivery driver, but so I assume it may apply to FedEx people. I think it applies to a lot of people who visit his estate, and they have to sign an NDA. The person I talked to has delivered things there a number of times, and they've had to sign NDAs that, the language is pretty extreme, but in some ways is actually pretty standard NDA language, I think, for these people. And, this is someone, again, who's just basically dropping stuff off. And they are photographed by security at his Austin estate. And then they have kind of a record of the NDA and that they're logged into the security system sent to their phone. And from my understanding, this stuff has grown a little bit in the last year or two, or since I initially started writing about it. Just the kind of elaborate nature of some of the stuff. Like now the security guys wear jackets that say something like Lonsdale on it, or
it's intergenerational.
So excuse me. The NDA basically says anything you see or observe here, anything, a person's name or like what someone eats or the color of their shirt cannot be mentioned. And there's a provision there that it says it's intergenerational, that it applies to, like, say I go deliver a pizza and have to sign this NDA. It applies to my children and his children and the Lonsdale children. And we both sides have to abide by this in perpetuity. Otherwise there could be great harm committed, and there would be a need for redress.
This is like the Roman era. And then you would do this really interesting chapter on the Proud Boys in crypto, and this is the funniest scene. I just have to. There's an interrogation with a guy whose last name is Arms.
Yeah, ARMES.
Can you just tell me about what happens there?
So this guy is, I think he's now in his late 20s. You can still find him on X. He's sort of a player in the Florida crypto political scene. He claims credit for helping write some laws that relate to crypto that DeSantis passed, but he's also very entangled with the really extreme right in Florida and in Florida crypto politics and people who were at January 6th. And he was being questioned by the January 6th committee under oath privately with his lawyer. And this guy is, let's just say he's swole. He's a lifter, and Samuel Arms. And suddenly he claims this is all, there's a transcript you can read, and I have some photographs or screenshots of it in the book, but you can read this online too. He claims to have developed a cramp in the middle while being interrogated about his sensitive relationships with people from right-wing militias and people who are at January 6th. And he falls to the ground, grabbing his hamstring, I believe it was. And he is going like, ow, ow. And you have this government investigator, this congressional investigator saying, okay, take your time. Like it's all right. At the same time, I mean, I would like to see this on film. Like at the same time, he's saying he's on the floor and he's telling the guy, I hit my personal best today. I hit my PR, I think he says, is my personal record on Scwhartz or something like that. And that's why he's cramping up now. But he's also very proud of that. And the investigator keeps just sort of saying like, all right. And you're wondering, as I think any reader would probably wonder, like, is this guy just faking this? Like, what is going on here? And then eventually he recovers, and they're like, and he's bragging a bit about his lifting feats, and then they put him back in the chair, and they go back to questioning him about was he going to stay in a hotel room with this militia member. And it goes on from there. But that's the absurdity that you often find in crypto world and MAGA world, is like these clownish characters.
My favorite line from the book, it just cracked me up. I gotta use it, was when you wrote, I gotta get this exactly. This is so funny. I just love this line you wrote. Here I got it. Bin in November 2017, Bin Talal was arrested and confined to the Ritz-Carlton, or it says something like under imprisonment in the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah, that was a strange one. I mean, I think there was another nickname for that, what became a prison, basically. But under the guise of an anti-corruption drive, MBS imprisoned all these people, or at least confined them in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh, and had a lot more torture there. And Prince bin Talal, who owned a big chunk of Twitter, presumably signed over his assets to MBS. I mean, that's what all these kind of princes and business titans from Saudi Arabia were made to do.
So the book ends with, you talk about the failure of the. Oh, by the way, your prayers were answered, Jacob. Did you hear the news?
What's that?
It seems like Kamala's gonna run again.
Oh God, she needs a legacy.
Are you ready for Brat Summer 2?
Not at the moment.
Wait, have you heard Mark Cuban explain why Kamala lost?
No, actually.
Oh my God, I have to. He said she wasn't pro crypto enough.
Yeah, that is, man. Speaking of being in a bubble.
Oh, and then he said, "Oh, that Brat Summer thing, that was amazing." He said, "That was genius. That was genius." All right, so but you talk about the failure of the Kamala campaign, and why did Trump come back? And I think you really hit on some really important stuff. Can you talk about why, looking back, you think she failed?
Sure. Well, I think, for one thing, she said she wasn't going to do anything different from Biden except have a Republican in her cabinet. And that kind of phony bipartisanship is not something that people are really looking for now, or haven't been for a long time, I think. And, just sort of generic appeals to moderation or centrism are not a value beyond the Washington political class. Like, most people hear that and their eyes glaze over. And I think there was also a failure, especially in the campaign cycle, to understand who their adversaries were. I mean, Democrats remain very divided on a lot of issues related to tech and crypto. And I've talked specifically about how I think crypto is not necessarily like a normal industry or even interest group. In the 2024 election, they were the biggest donor by industry. This is an industry that does not contribute a lot of economic value or generate a lot of productivity. It's much more like tobacco or payday loans, and that it harms the people who touch it. But because it's an outgrowth of tech and it's supposed to be innovative in the future, Democrats saw it much more as something they had to promote, and some of them still do, like Kirsten Gillibrand, despite the fact that now it's this obvious engine for corruption, for Trump's unprecedented corruption. And those kinds of failures, I think, to see and to know, like, you have enemies, and some of them are, people in tech, for example, or America's oligarchs. I think it is still a problem with the Democrats. It was definitely a problem with the Harris campaign. Because one thing also I think I learned while writing this book or just watching the culture since is, some of these people, Musk has his fans, but they're not very popular, and like the only reason you can have sort of Trump false populism and now Musk false populism is because people are really disenchanted and cynical. But when people, hear Mark Andreessen talk or what some of these guys want, it's not that appealing, and they don't really like it. Or even now with like AI, people are like, well, what am I really getting out of this? And you need a positive vision that you can articulate in opposition to that. And I don't think we heard that from Harris.
Well, personally, I do support the move to cut Social Security to establish a strategic Jizcoin reserve. It's called being a patriot.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
No,
Can I pay my taxes with that?
Yeah, but just to close on this, because this is important. I had David Cleon. Do you know him?
Yeah, I do.
I had him on. And I coined something, and it's very important. I need you to promote this. It's called this is serious. It's called Caveman Mindset, and it's all about how we're going to stop Vance. And I want to get your take on it, because I think this is what you're getting at. And we got it. It's very important to me we stop Vance, because I don't want Tucker Carlson in the Oval Office. And I say, you know how Trump had build the wall?
Yeah.
The 3 words of the caveman mindset are give people stuff. So here it is.
I like that.
Yeah. Where's the positive agenda? Like healthcare. What was Kamala saying? We have to defend Obamacare.
Right.
We have to protect Social Security. It's all defensive. There's nothing positive. And one thing I'm sort of mystified by is we see automation, robotics, AI coming online now. Imagine you're an Uber driver and you have 3 kids and you're watching Waymos with no drivers go around. The fear you must have. The public is ready for people to say, we need universal health care. And then to respond to things like, they talk about entitlement cuts. Democrats should say, not only are we never going to discuss cutting these entitlements, the only thing we're going to discuss is expanding them. To be bold. This is the time we need a much larger social safety net so people don't live terrified. And Bernie gets it. But beyond that, I don't see it. I saw an interview with Buttigieg, and his big must-do policy item was paid paternity leave. It's a good idea, but my point is, the Democrats' agenda is so pathetically measly. Like, do you remember when Biden was bragging about how he was able to negotiate the drug price of insulin? Not for all Americans, just for poor old people in Medicaid. David, during the debate, her big selling point was a tax credit.
My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start-up small businesses.
I just want the party to realize, if you run on a tax credit in 2028, prepare to lose. Like, that is pathetic. And also, getting away from means testing. From making everything so complex. It's a bit scary to listen to Pete Buttigieg, where his big thing is, Trump is bad, and my agenda is paid paternity leave. That's it. Yeah. He's talented, but it's sort of like, where's the beef? And my big message to Democrats is get more primitive. Start thinking like a caveman. Literally, like somebody's like, okay, you win. What do I get? What do I get? Democrats should become the party that Republicans used to say they were. They used to say, Democrats just want to give everybody free stuff. Become that party. Give people stuff. I think we should just say free healthcare, universal healthcare for all Americans. But we also need more. And I want you to come up with something with a good catchphrase that's about expanding the social safety net for AI.
We need a sweeping, holistic vision of how we're going to respond to the actual problems, very much including how AI is going to put people out of work, which everyone I know is scared about.
But we need something so simple that, like, a guy at a truck stop in Nebraska will, in 2028, will know, well, I don't agree with the Democrats on some of them other things, but I want that, insert whatever it is. I want that.
Right.
That meaning, and I'll stop there. But what do you think about the caveman mindset? What do you think?
I like it. I mean, I think simplicity is so important, and broad universal programs. Don't be cute about it. And certainly don't means test, but you want it to be things that people can understand, and not because people are dumb, but because they're busy and they have, heterodox beliefs, sometimes strange beliefs, and you need to explain it to everyone, from an 18-year-old voter to the abuelas down in the inner city who are fearing deportation. And Democrats are so afraid of being called certain things, like you say, like the party of free stuff or whatever it might be, or communists, that they don't have. They don't actually. I think one thing I say is maybe it's just about Harris, or maybe about Democrats in general. They don't sort of have beliefs so much as they kind of gently circle them or triangulate them. Like, they're always kind of circling these ideas without just being simple about it. And I think that's one thing one reason why, as you said, Bernie was really successful, and why Mamdani has been successful, is because, like, you were tying specifically to people's material needs in a straightforward way that they can understand.
Last thing, did you read the book Fight?
No.
About Kamala?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay. All right. Last thing, I'll let you go. This is going to blow your mind. This is why they only offered tax credits. You ready?
Economy, said one senior Harris aide. Deese counseled that Harris should not roll out any plans that were not already in the president's budget. The stated purpose was to make sure that her promises did not score. Washington speak for cost too much. Trump had a website full of videos promising popular policies that would run up annual deficits and the national debt by trillions of dollars. Seemingly every day he added to that pile. Harris's new campaign team, the old Biden guard, put on their green eye shades just when she needed to be motivating voters along the blue wall. Between the Kamala team and the veteran Biden hands, a patchwork of small bore ideas became her economic.
So basically, it goes on to say, they had these meetings. Of course, she had no beliefs, so literally a committee had
Yeah,
to,
that is a problem.
yeah, a committee had to decide what her policies were. And this guy, Brian Dees, who used to work for BlackRock, would just sort of sit in the back and be like, no, that would increase the deficit. Nope.
Yep.
It's like, you're saying this guy's a fascist. You got to win, but you can't increase the deficit?
It's silly, yeah.
So do you think, who's a good Democrat? I mean, do you believe AOC can replicate Bernie? Because I don't think she has that Rust Belt appeal. Yeah.
I don't know, but I do kind of think in a more legitimate primary process, which hopefully wouldn't be forever, but last as long as they do, but kind of like a robust primary where maybe people are actually competing and debating policies and ideas. Like, why not have her in the mix with some whoever are the other leading Democrats in 4 years? It's not something that I would say like don't do. I'm uncertain about. Would she win the primary? How would she pull nationally? I'm not sure, but I think there's so much caution and sort of preemptive self-censorship or just unwillingness to commit to ideas or candidates or different styles of politics among leading Democrats that I would hate to see her kind of preemptively sidelined like that.
And Gavin Newsom, he has a plan to solve homelessness with AI.
Yeah, which seems a little ridiculous. Not a fan of him very much. But again, he is popular. Like, I don't know, like in some polling, I don't really like him, but perhaps he should also be out there, at least according to how our system currently runs. And, I don't know who else might be more progressive standard bearers in a couple of years. But, I thought Whitmer was maybe a decent kind of electability.
He's boring, though.
Yeah, compromise candidate, because she polled very well, but I now by the time we get to 2028, I'm not so sure.
I do think you have to pass. It's true. You do sort of have to pass a podcast test now, in the sense that like you have to not sound totally like a robot.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not saying like Mamdani's policies need to be replicated nationally, but like one thing he did do is like he would go on these podcasts and he could hang, and being able to do that and talk fluently about your policies, but also just like not be a weirdo is pretty important.
Freeze the rent. Yeah. I remember that. Simple.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers the tax credit. 50
opportunity economy.
Oh my God, the opportunity economy. The final thing is there's a great Chamath quote that he said these companies suck. I sort of I loved one of the things you talked about this world of like all these funds and family trusts and Mm-hmm. But there's this interesting thing I've been hearing about where these private equity firms are kind of like, have you heard about this? They're kind of stuck, like they've run out of companies to like kind of pillage.
I don't know as much about private equity reaching that kind of wall, but that doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think that speaks to the larger problem, which is that so much of the economy is just like rent extraction or parasitic, whether it's in crypto or elsewhere, or just fee extraction or things like private equity draining productive assets. And this has been this complaint in the tech industry is that, they have a lot of startups, but they're not really producing a lot, and they're not producing a lot of deals or exits for people to make money.
Hey, and finally, LLMs. What
Mm-hmm.
we talked about it before. Have you updated your views? I feel like they've plateaued a lot, though. I think I told you, Google Gemini 3. This is really useful for you. It can now watch YouTube videos for you and like tell you when words appear, answer questions. That's very useful.
That would be interesting, and that that is like a search tool, and that's kind of what I need. Like I've used a little bit of Notebook LM, which is a Google thing where you can upload a lot of PDFs and basically say like, where does someone say this or something like that, or what is which one is the document about XYZ. I mean, they have prompts for questions, but it does seem like, first last year we had people on Wall Street, like at Goldman and elsewhere, writing these reports saying, I don't know, it doesn't look like the revenue generation is there for AI, among other potential economic headwinds. And then now you hear some people from the industry admitting like LLMs might might not be the path to AGI or superintelligence or whatever they're seeking. So I think there's some admission there. Some companies like OpenAI are so pot committed that I don't know how they move forward except by doubling down. But I don't think that's going to necessarily slow like the data center build out or anything else. But it is interesting to start hearing a little hesitation from within the industry, and like how will that manifest itself?
Do you use any on a daily basis?
No, I mean, and it's not ideological necessarily or principle. I'm open to it. I probably do it accidentally when I now just use Google search or something like that. If there's something that kind of makes sense, I guess, in my workflow, or, again, I do kind of look for search things, or I would like to be able to search video or search dialogue and video, that what you're talking about, that might be helpful. But so far, I haven't fallen in love.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about the Gemini thing because I just can't listen to these horrible people like Candace Owens talk.
Yeah,
and so I can't wait. They'll be able to listen to the garbage,
and that makes some sense to me. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Jacob. And
thank you,
Gilded Rage. I think this is gonna stand the test of time. I think historians are gonna come back to this because it captures a really important part of the American scene in a very full, and there's so much stuff we didn't even touch on. California Forever. There's so many interesting people. The guy who runs California Forever, all the funds are. It's such an interesting thing that I looked into the German guy in the UAE, Alex Tomas. Do you know they call him the human supercomputer?
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but thank you. Oh, promote whatever you want to promote.
Oh, well, encourage people to go to my website, jacobsilverman.com. You can find links about the book. I have the new book, of course, Gilded Rage, and then a podcast for the CBC, a 4-episode series about Musk and his politics, called The Making of Musk.
I didn't know about that.
I'm sorry. I haven't been as good about promoting it. I'm sorry to CBC also. But, I think it's an interesting look. We really, get into South Africa. There's a whole episode on Musk's grandfather, who was this, right-wing technocrat who was pretty interesting, kind of larger-than-life character. So, I think it's a good companion for some people, and it is a podcast if you want to do the dishes while listening to it. And also, I'm still on X for now as Silverman Jacob.
Yeah, and his grandfather, let's just say he was the type of guy who heard about apartheid and then became interested in moving to South Africa.
Absolutely. He went there to build it, and, came from a family of engineers who wanted to engineer a new racist society. Yes. His Joshua Haldeman, the grandfather, was very much excited by that prospect.
Last thing, I'm interviewing Peter. You know Peter Kafka tomorrow? Him?
I know who he is. Yeah, not personally.
I'm interviewing him tomorrow. One thing
Cool.
I'm going to ask him about journalism. I'm just curious. What do you think of the idea of like media dollars? The government like giving everybody like, let's say, like $50 to spend on media. The thing that I would expect is the issue is like, you don't want them to give the money to InfoWars or Stormfront.
Yeah.
So, like, I was sort of thinking you could have, like, a bipartisan, like, judges, 10 people, and they could pick, like, 5. It'd be like, or 10. Like, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, blah, 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 blah. What do you think?
I'm open to it. I think there are a lot of countries that have some kind of publicly funded media or subsidies that can be more broadly distributed, like you're describing, that probably have healthier media environments than here. I'm not, and certainly more sustainable from a business perspective. I mean, that's the thing, is like we're just going to keep going into the ditch because the tech companies, especially Google and Facebook, have sucked all the money out of media, and so there have to be either new business models or new public support in some way. I'm not an expert on that kind of thing, but someone like Matt Pierce, who used to write for the LA Times, I like a lot. He writes and speaks on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it upsets me because not only did these guys get rich, like kind of ripping off the media and their content, but then they have the gall after they destroy this industry, like David Sachs and all them guys, to shit on the newspaper and the few journalists remaining. And if our society was smarter, we would realize getting rid of local papers, state level, local journalism, having fewer and fewer professional journalists, it hurts us. It makes our society weaker. It literally is going to cost us billions of dollars, the amount of corruption that's going to happen on the state level, because there literally are no state level reporters all over the place.
Yeah.
We got to do something about it. We got to.
Agreed.
Thank you so much, Jacob.
All right, thank you.